I'm Tricia Benn, CEO of C-Suite Network and your host of Selling Power TV on C-Suite Network, bringing you a lineup of incredible speakers and experts from Sales 3.0. Just wait and stay tuned with us. We're here on Selling Power TV with Jeff Seeley, the CEO and owner of CRO International. Jeff, thrilled to have you here with us today.
It's a pleasure being here. I always enjoy these conferences, and this is probably, I think, my 15th time being at a Selling Power conference of some kind. So,
is it really?
Yeah. So I think I'm a regular now by this point.
I think that what do you call it? If you've done it once, it's new. The second time, it's a tradition. So 15, I don't know. You should be getting your gold watch. Or something.
Well, someday, yeah. Don't know Gerhard very well. There'll be no gold watches.
No gold watches. I will have a conversation with you.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Now, you just got off stage, and I mean, the room was captivated, and you really worked the room in creating a culture in the room, which I know culture was such a powerful message that you were delivering, and you lived it and breathed it in that room as you were presenting out what you were speaking to. So I'd love for you to share why is sales culture so important? What are we missing?
You know, it's interesting because we get so tied up in numbers and we get so tied up in all the data. And data is great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I ran a large, multi-billion-dollar company and data was everything. But we have just gone so far the other way that we forget about the human aspect of it. And people have all these different things going on. They have their own wants, their own needs. And then you think about the multiple generations and all those things coming together just make, culture so critical. And the other thing about culture is it creates tribal knowledge. I mean, companies have great history, especially in sales. I mean, they know the customers. They know everyone who, the good, the bad, the ugly. This was a great customer. Oh, once upon a time in, 1962, Uncle Harry got pissed about something, and so we don't go there anymore.
Right.
Those create, those tribal knowledge becomes really powerful. And for me, how kind of culture became even more important is about 7 years ago, I was in Australia, and I going up to Uluru and walked around Uluru and stayed in that area for a couple of days and talked to a bunch of the Aborigine people and learned basically, we're talking thousands of years of knowledge is passed through just verbal.
Incredible.
And so now, they're trying to document it, scholars are trying to document it historically. I'm thinking to myself, that's companies. We don't have thousands of years of history, but we have tens to hundreds to, in today's world, 18 months. I mean, it's like,
I was going to say, it might feel like it.
Yeah, 18 months is like a dog year sometimes. It's like 1 = 7.
Yes.
So, but all that information, and then if you're bringing an influx of new people, they got to know it. And so if your sales organization is growing, your leadership team's growing, it's like, how do you create that bond that you need? And people want to be part of a team. They want to be part of winning. I think if anything, the COVID told us a couple things, which is one, we can work from home.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on the other side is just everyone working in their house does not create a good, healthy mental health environment. It does not create a good work environment. And so that just became what I talk about a lot now, quite honestly.
Yeah. I love what you said about, 18 months can feel like at least 7 years or longer in business. And we all in our leadership roles in our businesses, we need to fast track. There's just no way you can sit still. Sitting still is literally going backward every minute. So I'm curious, what are those top 3 things that we need to do to make sure we're creating that healthy sales culture?
One, a mentor of mine a long time ago told me something, which when I first told me that, I was a young man. And he said, people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And so they don't care what you know about their numbers, what their pipeline looks like, anything else like that, until you have a personal relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Once you kind of start creating that personal relationship, now it's like, okay, now we're trying to achieve this together. It's not you and me this way. Now we're together. And that to me creates then, I understand what you need. You understand what I need. And we now have a balance. It's a little bit like the scales of justice. You think about it.
Yeah.
It's like I have to provide the things you need in order for you to provide things we need as a company, not I as the leader, but we need as a company. That becomes, critical to long-term success.
Okay, that's
what
one.
motivates people.
True. That's one. What's the next?
Sorry. I could tackle it.
Each one of these, to your point, Jeff, each one of these topics is a whole day discussion.
Yeah.
Right.
The second thing is clear communication and a level appropriate, for a better way to describe it. So if you're in a sales organization, you potentially have a customer service organization that's doing everything, via phone or email or whatever it is, your technology. You could also have a credit organization. Well, how I explain to customer service and credit is very different than how do I explain something to the VP of sales or the CRO, to the sales directors, to the salespeople.
Right.
So each communication has to be level appropriate. This is what I need to do to be effective. And here's what it means when I'm not. And a lot of times people don't even understand the consequence of, those what we call moments of truth. These kind of moments of truth. And if we have a bad moment of truth in customer service, they sometimes don't understand the implication of what that does to the organization. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, recognition. Recognition is critical, positive recognition. We have developed a culture around money, success, everything else. And don't get me wrong, like everyone else, I'm a capitalist and I want to make as much money as we can, but we also have to have recognition. And one thing we know, people don't leave jobs most of the time because of money. They leave because of the person they're working with and the culture and the lack of recognition. And recognition isn't we have to have a big party or, billboards on the local interstate, congratulating people or having an employee of a month parking spot or any of that stuff. It's recognizing your contributions at a one-to-one level. Certainly recognizing them publicly is great, but it's really that interpersonal recognition, which kind of goes back to, C number one.
Yes. Right.
So
So Jeff, when it comes to our roles as executives, we all know, and we've all been in those cultures that are just toxic. And I'd love for you to share, what are those flags where you better have the fortitude that you're going to make this different or stay away? What are those flags that you're looking for?
I think, at a sales professional level going in, changing a toxic culture is rather difficult. It starts at the top. In my talk, I gave an example of the former CEO of Coke. And, they went and introduced new Coke. And the most, what a disaster. I mean,
couldn't possibly have been worse.
Yeah, couldn't have been a worse idea. Well, one of the examples I used, it was, it went through a whole bunch of meetings, tens of millions of dollars, research, all this other stuff. But the thing that was most poignant in doing the research on that case example is somebody wrote a letter that said, Chief Dodo, Coca-Cola Company. And he didn't comment on the letter of, man, I made a big mistake or owned up to it. He was mad at the administrative person who gave him the letter and literally fired her. A gentleman who used to work for me as a consultant was one of the senior executives for Coke Europe. He fired her because she gave him the letter. Not because the letter was not, this was a big error. I should have,
And millions outside of that would say the same. I mean, right?
But it's like his ego was so big. And so that's where when you get toxic culture, when it's at that level, when I'm not mad because I owned up to a bad decision. I mean, again, people make bad decisions every day. It happens.
Yes.
Most of the time, it's not made at the lower level. It's not made out of malice. It's made out of trying to do the best I could. I took the information I had and so it didn't work. So kind of the toxic cultures, it's really, I tell people, if you think the culture is toxic going in, unless you're at a level where you can change it, stay away.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to change.
You mentioned being here 15 years, and I would love for you to share why. What is it about Selling Power and Sales 3.0 that keeps you coming back and dedicated to this community?
One, I think, in the sales world, and, this is, kind of a sales organization, leadership organization thing. I think first off, there just aren't a lot of places where you can interface with like-minded people. Not necessarily like-minded in thought, but like-minded in position, what you're trying to do in your organization. There just isn't that gathering point. And to me, that's the power of this, is you can have these informal conversations And to me, that's where the greatest learning comes. If you have curiosity, you're going to learn things. And I'd like to think at this stage in my life, I'm still able to learn. And so for me, it's the learning piece of that.
Jeff, isn't that the marker of great leadership? There's not a person that I've spoken with here that hasn't commented on what they've learned.
Yeah. And that's, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't think that way. They get to a certain level and it's like, well,
they know it all.
I know it all. I'm in a CEO. I've been the CEO, or I'm the CRO, and this is my third CRO gig or whatever it is.
Or maybe the chief dodo officer.
Yeah, the chief dodo officer. That's probably more appropriate.
Yeah.
I like to call him sometimes the vice president of rare events. I don't have patience for that anymore. And I think some of this comes back to even before I started coming to, these 3.0 conferences. I actually go back to, I don't think it was 1.0, but it was 2.0 for sure.
Yeah, there we go.
So, but early on in my career, I had the privilege of going to some of the original TED, which it's a very different world now what TED is. But back in the day, I'm going to sound like the old guy talking about gas prices here for a minute. But back in the day, it was such a creative, intellectual knowledge of, people, and just some of the great business design minds in our world were there just talking. And, you would sit down and just talk with people. And, it wasn't like any pretentiousness. I literally, sat down and I had the privilege of speaking there, and I just did a little 5-minute talk, and I followed Al Gore. And, not many times you can go on a stage and make fun of Al Gore. So, and I did simply because I wasn't a political comment, but he did such a nice job in how he talked and what he talked about. I just looked at him and said, if you probably would have acted that way on the campaign trail, you'd probably be the president. And people blew up laughing, and he even laughed. And he's like, pretty good. But it's like, that was a perfect example of someone who off camera was a really solid, pretty decent human being. It's someone you would sit down and chat like we are.
Real conversation.
And to me, that's what this is. It's like, not Al Gore's not running around here, but there's some people that have been here that are just amazing people. And I looked at them, and Bill McDermott is an example. Bill is now the CEO and chairman of ServiceNow. He was before that. He was at forgetting where he was, but he was one of the great people. I've sat down, just had 15-minute conversation with Bill, just chatting it up.
Yeah,
and it wasn't anything there. I run a small little company in Cincinnati, Ohio. Here's a guy, one of the preeminent people building culture, and that's if you talk to somebody, want to investigate somebody who's doing culture, go look what Bill does to businesses.
I love that. Great leaders elevate other great leaders, right? That's what we do. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on Selling Power TV.
It was great being here, Tricia, and thanks for all the comments.
And that's a wrap. I'm Tricia Benn, CEO of C-Suite Network, your host of Selling Power TV. What an incredible set of conversations with the world's best experts in sales at Sales 3.0 with Selling Power.